Minister, you may sit for a little until the House is ready.
Relax on the speaker rule, you know. What? You can't run from this, you know.
Members, let me remind you, the public is hearing nothing of this discourse. Nothing of this discourse. If you're not on the mic, you're not being heard. So could we allow the Minister of Finance to conclude or to close the debate? Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, this is a budget debate. And anything you put forward has fiscal implications. So, Madam Speaker, because I was interrupted, let me start again. Madam Speaker, allow me to demonstrate to the people of Jamaica that the promises from the opposition will create FINSAC 2.0. You see, Madam Speaker, the opposition put forward a lot of words with few figures, but within all those pages and pages and pages of words is a budget, an implied budget. Madam Speaker, they did not put forward, Madam Speaker, they did not put forward an explicit budget, but they put forward ideas, and those ideas can be costed, and they should have been costed and made into a budget. So, Madam Speaker, let us begin. Again, I will lay out side by side with the central government's budget for fiscal year 2025-26 and the opposition's implied budget for the fiscal year 2025-26 as well. So, Madam Speaker, as I indicated last week, the tax revenue that the central government is projecting, Madam Speaker, I do need some protection from the noisy gallery over there. Madam Speaker, as I indicated last week, the tax revenue that the central government is projecting for fiscal year 25-26 is 994,494,000,000. This is represented on the screen, chart number 2. The opposition did not have any objection to that figure. They didn't put forward any opinion as to whether or not that revenue figure is too high or too low. So I'm taking that as an implied acceptance. And so I will give them on their side of the ledger 949,494,000,000 in their column as well. Our tax revenues represent 5.9% increase over what we collected for fiscal year 2024-25. That is coming to a close. That's a little bit above inflation. No wild assumptions. Plus, Madam Speaker, we already subtracted all the give-ups in that figure. It's not to come. We took it out of the revenue projections already. And that cost was $9.2 billion. That's the cost of the good news that we presented, yes. So, Madam Speaker, I'm going to add that back to the opposition's column because, to be fair, those were our give-ups, not theirs, right? So we're going to put it back there. Right. Those are right. So we put it back. We put it back on their side of the ledger, right? Yes. So in the next chart, we move on to the next line item in the budget: non-tax revenues. These non-tax revenues, Madam Speaker, they include the $11.4 billion from NHT. They include asset sales, any share sales, for example, Trans-Jamaica. This is also where we put distributions from public bodies. And this would be where we have securitizations. They don't like that, so they can't get it. No, Madam Speaker, do you remember how the opposition leader declared that he would stop extracting the 11.4 from NHT, and that securitization is us taking revenues from the future to spend in the present, and something about, and you know, yes. Well, Madam Speaker, we cannot put any revenues from that in their column. Right, nothing. We would offend them if we did. So nothing there, Madam Speaker. So we move on to the next, item, the bauxite levy. Madam Speaker, we are projecting to receive $812 million in bauxite levy. And we will put that same amount, bauxite levy, on their side of the ledger as well. I know the opposition loves bauxite levy. They may even want to increase this number in their explicit, not their implied, their explicit budget. Yes. Because it was Michael Manley-led government who, after all, took on the transnational bauxite companies and imposed the 1974 bauxite levy. So they have a history with levies. As the history was written, Madam Speaker, in May 1974, Prime Minister Manley announced that Jamaica would repeal previous agreements Madam Speaker, as the history was written, in May 1974, Prime Minister Michael Manley announced that Jamaica would repeal previous agreements with the bauxite companies and impose a production levy on all bauxite either exported from or processed in Jamaica. Madam Speaker, anyone can read the history books about how that turned out. Revere Bauxite Company closed its shutters little more than a year later on August 19, 1975. Reynolds folded and left Jamaica in 1984. Alcoa also temporarily closed its gates in Clarendon on February 6, 1985. Yes, Madam Speaker. Yes, Madam Speaker. Jamaica did get increased earnings from the bauxite levy, which went from US $19.2 million in 1973 to a whopping US $180 million in 1974. But, Madam Speaker, the levy also moved the cost of Jamaican bauxite from being the cheapest to the most expensive worldwide. In an article entitled "The Bauxite Levy 40 Years On, Who Let the Puss Out of the Bag?" the author quoted Dr. Davis and economist Dennis Morrison as saying that Jamaica has little to show from the bauxite levy, and that the country suffered through ill-fated projects and misspending of the bauxite levy funds, which were lodged to the Capital Development Fund. The upshot of all of this, Madam Speaker, is that bauxite companies began increasing their investments, not in Jamaica, in other bauxite-producing countries, and Jamaica consequently lost its position near the top of the ratings as a world-leading producer. Another failed policy of the opposition. And as the bauxite left Jamaica, so did high-paying jobs. The opposition spokesman has some nerve, Madam Speaker, talking about low-paying jobs now. It's your government failed policy that sent the high-paying jobs in the bauxite industry packing. But, Madam Speaker, I digressed. Let me get back to the implied budget of the opposition. All right, so the next line item is capital revenue. We are phasing out this line, so there's no money there because it's incorporated elsewhere in the budget. So we move on to the next line, which is grants. We're projecting to receive $5.9 billion, call it $6 billion in grants. We will put that on the ledger of the opposition as well. So those are the revenue items, Madam Speaker. On our side, we expect to see revenue and grants of $1 trillion, 96 billion, and 83 million. On the opposition side of the ledger, they have an implied budget of implied revenue of 965 billion, 443 million, because they don't want any securitization or NHD contribution or other non-recurring revenues. They especially don't like securitization. And they figure, Madam Speaker, if they speak badly against securitization over and over and over and over again, Jamaicans will begin to think it's a bad thing, because after all, the leader of the opposition was a partner in a very big financial sector company, and so he must know a thing or two about securitization. And if he says he doesn't like securitization, then Jamaicans probably would conclude that something is wrong with securitization. But I want to say to Jamaicans, there is nothing wrong with securitization. The global securitized market is massive, nearly US 13 trillion. Research shows that 73% of residential mortgage debt is funded by securitization. 16% of auto loans are funded by securitization. 27% of commercial real estate debt is funded by securitization. 7% of credit card debt is funded by securitization. 8% of student loans are funded by securitization. 40% of multifamily debt is funded by securitization. 1 trillion of corporate borrowing is funded by securitization. The securitization market, while having roots in the late 18th century, with debt securitization, was modernized with the structured financing of mortgage pools in the 1970s and has grown significantly since then. So, Madam Speaker, I believe the opposition leader can stop now trying to drum all the negatives into the heads of Jamaicans about securitization.